The Lyrak Empire had reigned over the galaxy for centuries, a sprawling dynasty that thrived on power, control, and the ruthless ambition of its rulers. The royal family, known for its elegance and cunning, was the epitome of strength in an empire where weakness was not tolerated. Within this world of opulence and strategy, Princess Lyra, the youngest daughter of the Emperor, had lived a life of privilege, but was always aware of the dangerous undercurrents that flowed beneath the surface. Whispers of discontent had always existed within the palace walls, but Lyra had never imagined that she would be caught in the middle of a deadly power struggle. The palace, once her sanctuary, turned into a labyrinth of treachery. Her own family, the one she trusted most, conspired against her. Lyra, falsely accused of treason, a crime punishable by death, was stripped of her titles, her privileges, and her dignity. The betrayal cut deep, the wounds not only from the loss of her status but from the realization that her own blood had cast her aside. Exiled to a desolate planet on the fringes of the galaxy, Lyra found herself in a barren wasteland, far removed from the luxury of her former life. The planet was unforgiving, its surface scorched by relentless suns, and its landscape littered with dangers she had never imagined. Survival seemed impossible, yet the fire within her refused to be extinguished. Alone and vulnerable, Lyra wandered the hostile terrain, each step a battle against the despair that threatened to consume her. Days blended into nights, and hope faded with each passing moment. Lyra's regal garments were tattered, her once proud demeanor reduced to a mere shell of what it had been. As she stumbled through the endless wilderness, dehydration and exhaustion clouded her mind. It was then, in her darkest hour, that she encountered Captain Ethan Graves. Ethan had once been a decorated soldier, a hero in battles that spanned star systems. Now a mercenary, he roamed the galaxy on his own terms, driven by a code of honor that few could understand. He was on a scouting mission, tasked with evaluating the planet for potential resources. His ship had detected faint life signs, but he hadn't expected to find a figure like Lyra in such a desolate place. She appeared before him like a phantom, her figure weak and trembling, yet her eyes held a spark of defiance. Ethan's instincts told him to be cautious. In his line of work, trust was a rare commodity. Yet something in Lyra's gaze spoke of a truth he couldn't ignore. When she collapsed at his feet, he knew he couldn't simply walk away. Lyra, too weak to stand, looked up at Ethan with a mixture of fear and hope. She was no longer the Princess of Lyrak, but a desperate woman clinging to the last threads of survival. In broken sentences, she revealed her identity, her royal lineage, and the betrayal that had led her to this forsaken world. Her voice quivered as she pleaded for protection, for a chance to escape the fate that had been unjustly forced upon her. Ethan listened, his expression unreadable. He had heard many tales of betrayal in his time, but this one was different. There was something genuine in her desperation, a rawness that spoke to the honor he still held dear. Yet, he was a man of pragmatism, and taking on the burden of a fallen princess was not a decision to be made lightly. Lyra sensed his hesitation, her heart sinking with the weight of her circumstances. But she was not ready to give up. She had lost everything, but she would not lose her life to the cold grip of exile. Gathering the last of her strength, she made an offer, one that could change both their fates. "Marry me." The words hung in the air, surprising even herself with their boldness. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his mind racing to understand the implications. Lyra explained, her voice steady despite her fear. Galactic law granted asylum to any royal who married a member of another species. If he agreed, she could claim that right and they both could escape the dangers that awaited them. It was a strategic move, one that appealed to Ethan's sense of logic. But it was also a gamble. Marriage was a bond not easily entered into, especially under such circumstances. Ethan weighed the risks, the wrath of the Lyrak Empire, the complications of a political marriage, the unknowns of what lay ahead. But he also saw an opportunity, one that could turn the tables on the very forces that sought to control them. With a deep breath, Ethan made his decision. He extended his hand to Lyra, helping her to her feet. His voice was calm, firm, as he spoke the words that would seal their fates. "I'll do it!" But remember, this is not just about survival. If we do this, we do it together. We'll challenge the galaxy itself if we have to. Lyra nodded, a new determination burning in her eyes. Together, they would face whatever the galaxy had in store for them. Lyra and Ethan embarked on a journey that would take them across the farthest reaches of the galaxy, far from the luxury and security of the Lyrak Empire. Each day was a battle for survival, as they navigated treacherous star systems, evading the relentless pursuit of Lyrak forces determined to hunt them down. The once proud princess found herself in an unfamiliar world, where her titles meant nothing and only her wits and resilience could keep her alive. In the beginning, Lyra struggled to adapt to her new reality. She had been raised in the opulence of the royal palace, where every need was met, and every challenge was faced by others on her behalf. Now, she was learning to live by a different set of rules, ones that Ethan understood all too well. He became her guide in this harsh new existence, teaching her the skills she needed to survive, from navigating hostile terrain to understanding the complex politics that governed the galaxy. Ethan was patient, but he didn't coddle her. He pushed her to confront the weaknesses that had been hidden beneath layers of privilege. At first, Lyra resented his bluntness, his refusal to treat her as anything other than an equal in this fight. But slowly, she began to see the wisdom in his approach. The respect that grew between them wasn't born of rank or status, but of shared experiences, and the mutual understanding that they were in this together, for better or worse. As they journeyed from one star system to another, they encountered a multitude of alien species, each with their own agendas and histories with the Lyrak Empire. Some were openly hostile, seeing in Lyra nothing more than a symbol of their oppressors. Others were curious, intrigued by the unlikely partnership between a human and a Lyrak royal. A few offered aid, recognizing in Lyra and Ethan a potential force against the tyranny of the Empire. These alliances were fragile, built on trust that was constantly tested by the dangers they faced. The galaxy was a complex web of political intrigue, with factions that either sought to overthrow the Lyrak Empire or maintain the status quo. Lyra found herself at the center of these power struggles, her very existence a threat to the delicate balance. Ethan, with his military experience, navigated these treacherous waters with caution, always aware that one wrong move could doom them both. Yet, he was also keenly aware of the opportunities that lay in these alliances, the chance to gather support for their cause and turn the tables on the Lyrak forces pursuing them. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the bond between Lyra and Ethan deepened. What began as a pragmatic alliance started to evolve into something more profound. They shared moments of quiet understanding, where words were unnecessary, and they could simply be themselves, two souls united by a common cause. Yet, this growing attraction was not without its complications. They came from worlds that were vastly different, and the dangers that surrounded them served as a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. Lyra was no longer the sheltered princess who had first set foot on that desolate planet. She had grown stronger, more capable, and with each passing day, she felt a connection to Ethan that was impossible to ignore. But with this connection came uncertainty. The weight of her past, the burden of her responsibilities, and the secrets she carried, all threatened to unravel the fragile trust they had built. Ethan, too, was conflicted. He had always kept his emotions guarded, a necessity in his line of work. But Lyra was different. She challenged him in ways he hadn't expected, and the feelings that were beginning to surface were both a source of strength and a potential vulnerability. He couldn't afford to be distracted, not with the Lyrak forces still on their trail, and the galaxy's future hanging in the balance. Yet the more time he spent with Lyra, the harder it became to deny the connection that was growing between them. As they continued their journey, subtle hints of deeper secrets began to emerge, clues that suggested there was more at play than either of them realized. Lyra's exile, the accusations of treason, the relentless pursuit by her family, there were pieces of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. Ethan, with his keen instincts, sensed that there were forces at work beyond what they had seen, and that their fight against the Lyrak Empire might be part of a much larger conflict. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and horrors alike, and as Lyra and Ethan moved forward, they knew that their journey was far from over. They were bound by more than just a marriage of convenience. They were bound by the shared goal of survival, by the growing respect and affection between them, and by the secrets that would eventually come to light, changing everything they thought they knew. As Lyra and Ethan journeyed deeper into the galaxy, the truth they sought began to surface, layer by layer, revealing a darkness that neither had fully anticipated. It started with fragments of information, whispers from those who had once been close to power, and coded transmissions intercepted from Lyrak forces. What seemed like mere rumors at first slowly coalesced into a horrifying reality. The Lyrak Empire, known for its dominance and ruthlessness, had formed a clandestine alliance with a malevolent alien race, one that existed in the shadows, manipulating events from behind the scenes. This race, ancient and powerful, sought to extend its control over the galaxy, using the Lyrak as unwitting pawns in their grand design. Lyra had stumbled upon this secret by accident, an innocent inquiry into strange happenings within the Empire that led her down a path of discovery she never intended to follow. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Lyra's mind raced back to the accusations that had led to her exile. The charges of treason, which had seemed so baseless and cruel, were not entirely without foundation. Unknowingly, she had uncovered truths that her family and the Lyrak elites were desperate to keep hidden. The betrayal she had suffered was not merely a power play, it was a calculated move to silence her before she could expose the alliance that threatened the very fabric of the galaxy. This realization hit Lyra hard. The weight of her discovery was almost too much to bear. The empire she had been raised to believe in, the family she had loved despite their flaws, were complicit in a scheme that could doom countless worlds to subjugation. The treachery wasn't just personal, it was universal, a betrayal of everything she had ever known. And now, the responsibility of what to do with this knowledge rested squarely on her shoulders. Ethan, too, was shaken by the revelations. He had always been a man who dealt in certainties, relying on his instincts and training to navigate the chaos of the galaxy. But this was different. The conspiracy they had uncovered was vast, its implications far-reaching. The Lyrak Empire was not the only threat. The alien race pulling the strings posed a danger on a scale that was hard to comprehend. Together, Lyra and Ethan faced a moral dilemma unlike any they had encountered before. Exposing the truth would mean going against the most powerful forces in the galaxy, risking not only their lives but the fragile alliances they had begun to build. Yet, to remain silent was unthinkable. The knowledge they held could change the course of history, but at what cost? The tension between them grew as they grappled with the implications of their discovery. Lyra was torn between her duty to the galaxy and the remnants of loyalty she still felt toward her family. She knew that by revealing the truth, she would not only be condemning those who had betrayed her but also placing a target on the backs of everyone who stood with her. Ethan, on the other hand, was driven by a sense of justice that demanded action, but he understood the stakes. One wrong move could ignite a war that would engulf the galaxy in chaos. In the end, they made their decision. They could not in good conscience allow the conspiracy to remain hidden. The risk was great, but so was the potential reward, a galaxy free from the tyranny of both the Lyrak Empire and the alien race that sought to control it. But to achieve this, they would need more than just courage. They would need allies, and they would need proof. Their mission took on a new urgency as they set out to gather the evidence needed to expose the truth. Every encounter, every alliance became crucial. They sought out those who had been wronged by the Empire, oppressed species who had suffered under Lyrak rule, and those who had once served the Empire but had seen the corruption within. Slowly, they began to build a coalition, a network of resistance that spanned the galaxy. But with each step forward, the pressure on Lyra and Ethan mounted. The closer they came to revealing the conspiracy, the more dangerous their journey became. The Lyrak forces, now aware of the threat they posed, intensified their pursuit. Trust became a rare commodity, as they could never be sure who was truly on their side and who might betray them for a chance at survival or power. As they navigated these treacherous waters, the strain began to show. The bond that had grown between them was tested as never before. The burden of the truth, the constant danger, and the weight of their mission pushed them to their limits. Lyra, once a symbol of royalty and privilege, now stood on the edge of a precipice, her future and the future of the galaxy hanging in the balance. And Ethan, ever the soldier, found himself questioning whether they had the strength to see this through. In the quiet moments between battles, when the galaxy seemed to pause for breath, they would look at each other and see the fear and determination reflected in their eyes. They had come too far to turn back, but the path ahead was more uncertain than ever. The truth they had uncovered was powerful, but would it be enough to overcome the forces arrayed against them? Only time would tell, and time was running out. Ethan had always been a man of few words, his past a mystery he kept tightly guarded. But as the journey with Lyra continued, the time came when the secrets he had buried for so long began to surface. The story of how he came to be a soldier, a mercenary, and now an unlikely ally to a fallen princess, was deeply intertwined with the political machinations of the Lyrak Empire. And at the heart of it all was his father. Years ago, Ethan's father, Thomas Graves, had been a respected diplomat, one of the few humans to hold a position of influence within the Lyrak Empire. He had served as a close advisor to the Lyrak Emperor, navigating the complex web of interstellar politics with skill and integrity. His reputation for fairness and his ability to mediate conflicts had earned him the trust of many, including those within the royal family. For young Ethan, his father was a figure of admiration, a beacon of what humanity could achieve in a galaxy dominated by powerful alien races. But that respect and influence made Thomas Graves a target. One fateful day, under circumstances shrouded in secrecy, he was assassinated. The official reports claimed it was the work of a rogue faction, a random act of violence in a galaxy full of dangers. But Ethan had never believed it. The details never added up, and the Lyrak Empire, so meticulous in its governance, seemed oddly complacent in accepting the narrative. The loss of his father marked the beginning of Ethan's transformation from an idealistic young man into the hardened soldier he would become. Years passed, and Ethan buried his grief, channeling his anger into his military career. He became known for his strategic brilliance and his ability to keep his emotions in check, a necessary trait in the volatile world of galactic warfare. But the questions surrounding his father's death never left him. They lingered at the edges of his consciousness, driving him forward even when he didn't fully understand why. It wasn't until he met Lyra and began unraveling the conspiracy within the Lyrak Empire that the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The same alien race that had formed an alliance with the Lyrak, seeking to control the galaxy, had been behind his father's assassination. Thomas Graves had known too much, perhaps stumbled upon their plans as he navigated the corridors of power. His death had been a calculated move, a way to eliminate a threat before it could expose the alliance. The revelation hit Ethan like a hammer. The carefully constructed walls he had built around his emotions began to crumble as the truth set in. His father hadn't been just another casualty of galactic politics. He had been murdered as part of a grander scheme, one that Ethan now found himself caught in the middle of. The mission, which had once been about survival and uncovering the truth, now became deeply personal. It wasn't just about exposing the conspiracy. It was about justice, vengeance, and finally putting to rest the ghosts that had haunted him for so long. Lyra watched as Ethan grappled with the weight of these revelations. She had seen the strength and determination that drove him, but now she saw the pain that lay beneath. She understood all too well the burden of betrayal and the toll it could take on the soul. As he wrestled with his anger and grief, she offered her support, standing by his side not as a princess or a fellow warrior, but as someone who understood the complexities of loss. Their bond, already strong, deepened further in those moments of shared vulnerability. Yet, with this deepening connection came a new tension. Both Lyra and Ethan had personal stakes in their fight against the Lyrak Empire, and while their goals aligned, the motivations that drove them began to diverge. For Lyra, it was about exposing the truth and dismantling the oppressive regime that had betrayed her. For Ethan, it was now also about avenging his father, about settling a score that had lingered unresolved for too long. The line between personal vendetta and the greater good of the galaxy began to blur, and both of them knew it. They faced the difficult task of balancing their emotions with the broader implications of their actions. Could they afford to be driven by personal desires when the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance? It was a question that weighed heavily on both of them as they plotted their next moves. In the end, the decision was made. They would continue their fight, but now with an added resolve. The truth needed to be exposed, not just for the sake of justice, but to honor the memory of those who had been lost in the shadows of the Lyrak Empire's deceit. For Ethan, this meant confronting the forces that had taken his father's life, ensuring that they could never again wield such power unchecked. Together, Lyra and Ethan prepared for the battles that lay ahead, knowing that their journey was far from over. The stakes were higher than ever, and the path forward was fraught with danger. But they had each other, and the strength of their convictions. And for Ethan, there was now a clarity of purpose that he hadn't felt in years, a drive to see this mission through to the end, no matter the cost. The galaxy stood on the brink of a cataclysmic shift, with the oppressed species rallying behind Lyra and Ethan. They had spent months forging alliances, binding together those who had suffered under the Lyrak Empire's rule. The once fragmented resistance was now united, driven by a common goal: to dismantle the Empire and expose the alien race that had manipulated it from the shadows. This coalition of the marginalized, once scattered and powerless, was now a force to be reckoned with, thanks to the leadership and determination of an exiled princess and a hardened soldier. The final confrontation loomed ever closer, a clash that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Every strategic decision, every battle fought, brought them nearer to the heart of the Lyrak Empire. It wasn't just about overthrowing a tyrannical regime, it was about uprooting the corruption that had festered for so long. The challenges were immense: military might, political sabotage, and the constant threat of betrayal from within. But with each victory, small though it might have been, the tides slowly turned in their favor. Lyra, once a figure of grace and privilege, now stood at the forefront of the rebellion, a symbol of hope and defiance. Her journey had brought her full circle, back to the very family that had cast her out. The confrontation with her family was inevitable, a clash of ideals that had been brewing beneath the surface for far too long. When the moment arrived, it was charged with emotion, a mix of anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. Lyra faced her siblings, the ones who had conspired against her, and the Emperor, her father, who had turned a blind eye to the injustices committed in his name. In that moment, the weight of her decisions bore down on her. She could feel the tension in the air, the knowledge that her actions would either shatter the Empire or see her condemned as a traitor once more. The standoff was intense, words exchanged with the bitterness of wounds that had never healed. Yet Lyra stood firm, her resolve unshaken. The truth she carried was her weapon, and she wielded it with precision, laying bare the crimes of the Empire and the sinister alliance that had fueled its power. Ethan, too, had his reckoning. The alien race that had orchestrated his father's death was within his grasp, the shadowy figures who had pulled the strings from behind the scenes. His confrontation was not one of words, but of action, cold, calculated, and driven by a need for justice. The enemy was cunning, their defenses formidable, but Ethan's resolve was absolute. Every move he made was a step closer to avenging his father, to ensuring that those responsible could never again wield such unchecked power. The battle was brutal, a test of every skill he had honed over the years, but Ethan was relentless. When the moment came, he struck with the precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. The climax of their struggle was a battle that shook the galaxy to its core. Fleets clashed in the cold vacuum of space, armies fought on distant worlds, and the future hung in the balance. It was a fight not just for survival, but for the very soul of the galaxy. Lyra and Ethan, now leaders in their own right, stood at the center of it all, guiding their forces with a mix of strategy and sheer determination. The odds were against them, but they had long since learned that victory wasn't always about numbers or strength, it was about will. As the battle reached its peak, the moment of truth arrived. The decisive blow was struck, not by sheer force, but by the revelations that Lyra and Ethan had worked so hard to uncover. The galaxy watched as the Lyrak Empire, once seemingly invincible, began to crumble under the weight of its own corruption. The alien race, exposed and isolated, lost its grip on the Empire, its plans for domination thwarted by the very species it had sought to control. In the end, Lyra and Ethan emerged as heroes to some, martyrs to others. Their victory had come at great cost, but it was a victory nonetheless. The galaxy was forever changed by their actions, the old order swept away in the wake of their rebellion. The Lyrak Empire, now weakened and discredited, faced an uncertain future, its remnants struggling to maintain control in a galaxy that no longer feared it. For Lyra, the victory was bittersweet. She had reclaimed her honor, but at the cost of everything she had once held dear. The empire she had been born into was gone, replaced by a new era that she had helped to shape. Ethan, too, found a measure of peace, though the wounds of the past would never fully heal. He had avenged his father, but the price had been steep, and the scars ran deep. In the aftermath, they stood together, surveying the galaxy they had fought so hard to save. The rebellion had succeeded, but the work of rebuilding was only just beginning. The future was uncertain, but they faced it with the same resolve that had carried them through the darkest of times. Their bond, forged in the fires of conflict, would endure, a testament to the power of human determination and the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to challenge the stars.